Before we move away from this slide, I am honored to be here as a member of Speakers Bureau and Humanities Washington. And something that's really critical in having Speakers Bureau continue as a federal grant is having feedback from attendees. So this QR code is here now and will appear at the end of the slide, and it really helps them measure the impact of the grant and continue to get that federal funding to keep supporting the program in the future. And, thank you, Enlightened Kitsap. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Barbara and everybody for all the tech support. I'm really excited to be here with you all today and maybe present the program. That introduction was amazing. Now I'm humbled to be sandwiched between Felix Bunnell and State Department presentation. I'll do my best. I'll try. Okay, this is great. But you guys, it's so great to be part of such a wonderful program. So as Barbara mentioned, I've worked at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma for a little bit over 10 years now. I started as our curatorial assistant and got involved in coordinating our residency program and eventually, and now fill the role as curator, along with most of those other things still, actually, if I'm being candid. And the thing that I am most excited about in my job is to be as an art history student, from Whitman College, in an art movement that's happening right now. It's such a pleasure. Most of the artists that we're going to talk about today not only are still living, but are here locally within a couple of hour drive of where we're standing right now, and talking about how that community has made our community more dynamic is a lot of what we're going to accomplish here today. But the other thing I love the most about Museum of Glass is I always assumed that working in an art museum, I think there's this perception that art museums are scary and unapproachable. And the thing I love the most about Glass is that there are a lot of ways that we can talk about art that maybe you wouldn't experience in a gallery that is more contemporary or historic in nature. So I'm excited about that. And today I'm hoping to share a little bit more of how that story came here and impacted Washington. If you haven't been to Museum of Glass in Tacoma, I'm just here to show you this map of how very close that we are together. We're 42 minutes apart. And before you leave, I brought some guest passes. So hopefully we can see you down in Tacoma soon. But the museum, has anybody been? Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, come back. But the thing I always get asked about is the big silver cone that you can see in the picture. And if you've been, you know that it's a large hot shop with an amphitheater in it. And the reason that we're here in Tacoma, they are in Tacoma, is a big part of the story that we're going to tell today. But a lot of the photos and video that I have are from our collection and from the artists that work at the museum and other places. So that will be exciting as well. For everybody on Zoom, we're going to track your questions in the chat, but I'm a very informal lecturer. So if there are questions, in the middle, let me know. But I wanted to start with a little icebreaker for the group. And those on Zoom, I will give you gold stars for chatting your answers. But I wondered if anybody could tell me some things that Washington is famous for. Apples. But apples are a great answer. Coffee, I'll take it. Hops, bowling, Boeing. Yes, Chihuly, thank you. So I made this map because it's amazing to me how many times I asked this question. There's so many things. Adam West, the original Batman. Not only was Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, born in Tacoma, but Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Dune, was born in Yakima. So that's a double hit. 10 Things I Hate About You, filmed in Tacoma, Starbucks, but really the thing that we are most known for in the art world is being the global center of one of the biggest glass schools and glass movements in the world. And something I'm excited to talk about today. So here's how this talk will unfold. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about glass as a material and how it works instead of painting and clay and marble to make art. Then we're going to do a little look at the history of how glass art landed here in the Northwest and why. And then we're going to look at some of the artists that are local to us here and the work that they make to wrap us up. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay, everybody on Zoom's okay, Barb?
Also, there's one from Zoom, they said the Salish people.
The Salish people, what a great answer. What a great answer. And we'll discuss some Salish artists later in the group. So extra gold star to Zoom. Thank you for that. Okay, so to get started, the beginning of this talk is a little bit of glass 101. So I was wondering what comes to mind object-wise when you think of glass? Windows, great answer. Drinking glasses. Vases, thank you.
Mirrors.
Mirrors, thank you. Eyeglasses, that's great. Chandeliers, lots of things, which is why it's such an accessible material. Telescope lenses are another fan of mine. iPhone screens were invented at Corning Inc. or Corning Museum of Glass over in Rochester, New York. And what I think is the most remarkable is how the chemistry of glass makes it a really exceptional material. So the first question a lot of people ask when they come into the museum is what exactly is glass? And the chemical answer is that it's an amorphous solid, which is a big word to say that it has an irregular molecular structure. So if you look at these three graphs, crystal, which is all the way on our right, has a lattice, which is why it's so rich. It's like crystal, the rock has a lattice. Liquids flow because their molecules are disordered. Glass is a little bit of both, which means that when it's at room temperature, it's solid, like the screens on your phones or your wine glasses. But when it's hot, it is not liquid, but it is viscous, which is the quality that glass blowers harness when they make their work. The other amazing thing about glass is that it operates a lot like a cookie recipe. So there is a basic building blocks, silica, which is the base, so your sugar and your butter. That's, in nature, most often that's sand or lightning struck rock. Soda ash, which is like baking soda. In the cookie recipe, it lowers the melting temperature. And the last ingredient is lime, which acts like a flour and gives you the bulk. And like cookies, these three things mix together with heat and form most of the molten glass that's used around the world. But like a cookie recipe, what changes about the qualities of glass is the result usually of a metal oxide that's added to that basic recipe. So crystal is silica, soda ash, lime, and lead oxide or potassium. And adding those two metal oxides increases the refractive index of the clear glass, which basically means it makes it sparkly, which is why your Waterford wine glasses sparkle in the light. It also makes the glass, so we would say softer when it cools, but it makes it easier to cut, which is another reason why crystal is used to make faceted glasses. Pyrex is another example of that basic silica, soda ash, lime, but they replace a lot of the lime with boron oxide, creating a glass I could call at work borosilicate, which is basically Pyrex. So what borosilicate does is increase the temperature at which glass starts to become soft, which is why you can use your Pyrex dishes in the oven. It also is a type of glass that gets used in scientific equipment, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and neon signage tubing is another example of borosilicate glass. Color is, we were talking about color a little casually up front, but the other big question I ask is how did the color get there? And it is a separate type of glass from the clear. So by adding metal oxides, this is a great color chart to that basic recipe. It turns colors. Most of the all the glass that we melt at the museum, for example, is clear. All of these colors are very expensive. Red, for example, is gold oxide plus silica, soda ash, and lime. So artists add color sparingly, and they use clear to fill out the bulk of the shape, adding little bits of color in between the layers. The other question I get asked a lot is how hot is it? Which is a great question. And I love this thermometer that we made. So your cookies are 325 to 375, and the chocolate chip ones outside are a fantastic example of that. Thank you again for that. Campfires are about 575 degrees. If you think about your marshmallow, the lava that flows out of Kilauea on the Big Island in Hawaii is 1165 degrees. And our furnace melts glass, most furnaces melt glass at 2300 degrees, and it's 2100 degrees when it comes out while the artists are working with it. And it fluctuates in between 2100 degrees and about 1100 degrees while glass blowers are working with it. So hotter than molten lava most of the time. And because of that, there is this rich tradition of tools that are really the bulk of how glass blowers work and are important because you can't touch it. It's not like clay where you can sculpt it with your hands. And what I think is I brought some tools that we're going to talk about together, at the end of the talk. And for the Zoom folks, I'm going to wear a microphone while I do that, and we'll add that recording to it. But what I think is amazing is that if you talk to Italian maestros who are the master glassblowers from an island called Murano outside of Venice, they would tell you that the tools glassblowers use are the same as they were 500 years ago. The only change is that the furnaces are electric and not wood, which is pretty amazing. And we're going to talk about the history of why that is. But the most remarkable part is watching it happen. So I brought this little clip of a piece coming together in our own hot shop. So you can see how a pattern is built and all of the different tools that these artists are using to help manipulate the color and shape of those stripes into what's eventually going to become a bowl. And what you're watching, most of the glass blowing that you see here in the Northwest is Italian based. And we're going to talk about why that is. Dale Chihuly has a big part to play in that. But most of these techniques, this being the most dramatic part at the end, they use the centrifugal force of the spinning pipe to blow out a big plate at the end. But that's just a little clip of the many, many, many steps that make something like a plate, which seems simple, come together in the hot shop. And from the outside, you might look at this and say, wow, why, when you could pick up a paintbrush, would you go to all this trouble to make something out of glass? And there are three things a glass artist would tell you, and they've told me. The first is they all have this moment where inevitably they're in college and they're studying ceramics and they're up late at night working on a project, and there's a light literally a light from the end of the hall, and there's something captivating about the molten material of glass. But what I think it's remarkable is it can do two things that no other art medium can do. It captures light. So a lot of the artists that we'll talk about today use glass to manipulate the light around it. This piece is called Shadow Catcher by an artist named John Kiley, who worked as part of Dale Chihuly's team for a long time. But he's using these discs of glass color to cast reflection on the light behind it. And the other thing that's really unique about glass, because it's molten, it can freeze things in motion. This artist is a Tlingit artist who lives on Lopez named Raven Sky River, and he grew up canoeing and kayaking around the San Juan Islands. So most of the work he makes are marine life, but he can make an octopus look like it's swimming because it's crazy when he makes the octopus picture a tube connected to a blowpipe like you guys just saw, and he cuts the tentacles while he's working. So first he cuts the tube in half and then in quarters and then in eighths. And while he's doing that, he's positioning each tentacle. And remember, it's 1100 degrees while he's doing this. So there's a high degree of it ends up looking like a choreographed dance because of the amount of communication he is doing with his team to control the temperature on each tentacle while sculpting them. Everybody doing okay? Any questions? Okay, now we're jumping in. This is a very, very abridged look at glass history. But I have a question to start it off. How old do you think the oldest man-made glass object in Washington State is? In Washington State. Yeah, I'm like Humanities Washington. Guest lecture. Yes, Maine and Washington State.
Oh.
Yeah. Maine and Washington, or I should say, more accurately, and this is a clue, discovered in Washington State.
Oh, okay.
12,000 BCE is the oldest glass man-made object ever discovered in Washington State. This is a Clovis point or an arrowhead that's in the collection of the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. It was discovered in Douglas County and dated. So this is obsidian, which is a natural, it's a kind of a cheat. It's a natural made glass. Usually it's made when lightning hits sand, silica or sand, but technically it counts. But it is an interesting point because there are also examples of glass blowing seen as in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt and the Roman Empire. All of these pieces are in the Seattle Art Museum's collection. The one with the red background and the faces is from Syria. The middle is a Roman bead from the 1st century AD. And the picture is from right around the same time. So what I think is amazing is that regardless of how accurate your archaeology department is, in general, glass blowing dates back to the Mediterranean, like to the perimeter of the Mediterranean in the centuries before 0 AD. And what's interesting is that techniques go through periods of like Renaissance and decline. Like they are discovered, they fall out of favor, they decline, and they're rediscovered. And so there's a lot of moments where there are innovations made that then disappear and get rehidden. But there are a lot of glass blowing that we're going. I want to acknowledge like China and Japan and the Middle East have a really strong glassblowing history also, but I'm going to focus on Europe because it's the history that most directly influences us in the Northwest. So I acknowledge there's a lot of history that we're going to now skip past, but this builds toward where we are today. So here are some examples of famous glass in European history. Stained glass is one that I like to bring up because it's often forgotten, but it was really important to the Catholic revival after the Middle Ages and right before. There was a lot of philosophy being written adjacent to the Catholic Church about light being a metaphor for God. So Gothic churches began including these beautiful stained glass windows, which were illustrations of the stories in the Bible, but also a way to convey the awe and the wonder of what was being preached at the pulpit. This uh, ultimately is in the cycle I was mentioning during the rise of Protestantism. Many of these windows are destroyed. And the ones that were destroyed, unfortunately, many of them did not survive World War I or World War II. So many of them have been repaired. But it's interesting because the act of repairing those windows in the 50s and 60s has led to a studio stained glass revival. So just an example of there's a lot of back and forth between craftsmen and artistry, and this like just a small example. In the middle is a Baccarat crystal paperweight. In the paperweight, this paperweight pattern is called Millefiore, which is Italian for 1,000 flowers. And all of the flowers in this paperweight are little tiny Italian patterns that were purchased by crystal factories in France and used to make paperweights. Cameo engraving is something we're going to talk about at the end, but it was a ancient Roman technique of including pattern on vases. So the way that this Milton vase is made is that it is a blue glass with a white glass covering it, and the artist then carves back through the white until the amount of blue they need for the shading is showing. So those are some of the techniques in Europe that are coming in and out. But the place we're going to talk about the most today is Murano. So if you're looking at a map of Venice, Italy, which looks like a fish, Murano is this island just to the north. And Venice historically has been a city of glassblowers, but in 1291, the city council voted to annex all of the furnaces to the island of Murano because they kept burning the city down. Like quite literally, it was a civic achievement to limit them. But what happened is it ended up allowing the Venetian government to confine these very talented craftsmen and limit the ability of the rest of Europe to acquire Venetian glass. So the two things happen. The community becomes very insular over hundreds of years. It's a very family-based business, like many trades in Europe. So many factories that are on Murano today can trace themselves back to almost 1291 when their families started it, which is amazing. But the other thing that happens is the rest of Europe becomes completely starved for the Venetian technique. Like there are stories of Austrian kings and French kings smuggling glass blowers out of Murano to try to cut down on the tariff of having to pay the Venetian government for the access to the material. Other centers of glass blowing pop up, throughout Europe. We're not going to get there yet. Bohemia, what becomes Germany and Czechoslovakia, becomes really well known for crystal. The UK, thanks to their porcelain adjacent, it really becomes a cameo engraving center in the 17 and 1800s. France takes the lead in the late 1800s and early 1900s with the Art Nouveau and Art Deco movements. We're right at about the time when World's Fairs are becoming popular across the US and Europe. There is one example, an artist named René Lalique, who might be a familiar name, who adjacent to the same logic with Henry Ford and the Model T is percolating into the design conversation in Europe in the beginning of the 20th century. So René Lalique is one of the first glass designers to take a factory and modify the process of using machines to make glass blanks, and then you can see this line in the black and white photo of men engraving them. So it's hand finished, but the blank is mass produced. And that becomes the model all across the US and Europe. Another name that might be familiar is Tiffany, Louis Comfort Tiffany, who worked in New York. This beautiful window is also in the collection of the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. They have two that were adjacent to their founding. But his factory, and he, like René Lalique, is a designer, not a maker. So a lot of his works get attributed to him, but were made by a really incredible community of women who would cut and pick the color and led them into the glass designs that Tiffany initially sketched out. Another factory that is popular in the U.S. is Steuben, another New York company, and more known for crystal than the picture from our collection I picked here. But so we're getting closer to our story. And what is important is that by the time the 1950s roll around, this stuff is old fashioned. And it's factory made and it's bought at Saks Fifth Avenue. And it's not an art material on anybody's brain, which our story really starts in 1962, the same year of the World's Fair here in Seattle. There was a chemist and an engineer named Harvey Littleton who was interested in making glass more accessible to solo artists, to people working by themselves outside of the factory. So he invented a glass blowing furnace that could fit in your home garage and do the same amount of heat transfer to melt glass to sculpt. He taught a series of workshops about this new technology in Toledo at the Toledo Museum of Art in Ohio. And that is what that kicks off, what lots of people call is the studio glass movement, which is where the part of our art history book that I would get to write about. And so all of a sudden, along with a lot of the craft revival in the 60s, glass has this new interest from a student community. So after his workshops, Harvey Littleton becomes a professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he has a student that you might have heard of named Dale Chihuly. And now we're here in the Northwest. So Dale Chihuly was born in Tacoma in 1941. And I get asked all the time, is this guy really a big deal? And since most of you have heard of him, yeah, that's the first answer. But he really is the vision behind how our glass scene here, catapulted glass into the phenomenon that it is today. Like truly, sincerely, he is a visionary behind one of the best glass education centers in the world, Pilchuck Glass School. And most impactfully, he is a prolific employer and mentor of the artists who are making work today. Most of the people that I, talk to on a day-to-day basis have worked at his studio for a wage, at some point in their career. And he's a friend and a collaborator that really helps bring a community here to give us something to talk about to begin with. So his story starts at University of Washington. He got a undergraduate degree in design and architecture, and then went to Rhode Island School of Design back east for his graduate degree. And in 1968, he applied for a U.S. Fulbright grant from the state government, and he was awarded funding to go to Venice. See, we're back. I told you we'd get there. Really what he wanted to do was understand how European glass factories work. So he wrote, I think, more than 100 factories in Europe, and only a couple of them wrote back. And one of them was a designer named Paolo Vanini, who is a driver of history in the glass scene in Murano. But at the time, he was an avant-garde. He was sort of on the fringe of the glass community in Murano because he was willing to experiment and push the boundaries by inviting other artists into his factory. So Dale received a Fulbright, spent his time there observing and researching Italian glassblowers. And he was not the only Fulbright recipient to go to Venice, but he, was one of the first from the area. There's an artist who lives on Whidbey Island, Richard Marquis, who I could do an entire presentation on by himself, but he received a Fulbright the next year in 1969. And his research there differed from Dale's. Dale spent time observing how the factories, how the tools, technology, and team work together. Dick Marquis really spent time studying Marini. Really specifically, he sat down and learned those patterns in that Baccarat paperweight are made by bundling little sticks of glass together. If you've ever made a phyllo dough bead, it's the same idea where you bundle color and then slice the cane down the center. So his career sparks in a different way. I love this quote from his oral history interview. Dale was interested in organizing things and how they structured their hot shop. Dale designed things. Well, actually, he just used it as a way of meeting people. But I actually wanted to work on the floor. So his story was more about his mastery of this one specific technique and how he taught it to others. He ends up becoming a college in Berkeley. He got professor in Berkeley, but then travels to Australia and kicks off a vibrant glass community in Australia, which is a long story for another time. But to go back to Dale, Dale returns to the Northwest. His mother lived in Tacoma all her life, so it was really important to him to come back here. And what he wanted to do was try to replicate that collaborative, team-based glassblowing approach and teach it to other people. So he had this somewhat crazy idea of forming a glassblowing school. So he received a $2,000 grant to teach glassblowing. He wanted to be in Tacoma, and he met two philanthropists, John Hauberg and his wife, Annie Gould Hauberg, and they offered him the use of their timber farm up north of Everett in a place called Stanwood, which is, north of Everett. And this is a photo of their very first workshop in 1971. This is what the poster advertising the opportunity said. He advertised a no deposit with lots of return glass, etc. workshop. Free tuition, you provide food and camping equipment. And he just drew a picture of a forest and a tent, and that's pretty much what happened. But there were 18 students and two other teachers. with this crazy lean-to tent, but they built a furnace. And that was the beginning of what would become one of the most sought after glass experiences in the world. You can apply to be a student at Pilchuck. They still to this day maintain the same curriculum. They only host classes in the summer, mostly because Dale and his compatriots were UW professors at the time, so it gave them the summer off to be experimental. And today you can apply. They host, as a side note, they often host tours once a quarter. So if you've ever wanted to go see and have a demo, I'll tell you about my favorite one here in a little bit. But as the school began to get momentum, Dale was always reflective of his time in Murano and wanting to bring those specific makers here to the Northwest. So he sent one of his graduate students, Benjamin Moore, who is another a really prominent figure of our community here, to Murano in 1977 as their education coordinator. And he was able to invite their first Italian maestro to visit Pilchuck. His name is Keiko Ungaro. He's there in the plaid in 1978 to teach a class. And it went well for the Americans. Keiko elected not to return the next summer because he felt too uncomfortable imparting so many secrets on artists that had not been part of his community in Murano. But fortunately for all of us here, his brother-in-law, another maestro named Lino Tagliapietra, was interested in coming to Pilchuck the next summer in 1979. I have heard from many artists, the most recently, the way I heard this described, somebody told me that the summer Lino came to Pilchuck was like going from the scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey where monkeys are banging rocks together into the 20th century. So Lino is he just turned 90, and he is one of the most talented glassblowers in the world today. And luckily for all of us, very open to sharing and experimenting. So the Lino was so impacted by his time at Pilchuck that he ended up settling here in Seattle part-time and collaborating with Dale Chihuly. He's here making a series called The Venetians, which you can see quite a lot of around the area. But the biggest, and we've been lucky, well, Lino has a big footprint, for us at Museum of Glass, which I'll talk about at the end. But the watching Lino work is really remarkable because he doesn't even need to talk. Because of the heat and the equipment, it takes 4 to 6 people to blow glass between opening the furnaces and passing tools. Lino works with almost 10 to 12 people because he's always working in our hot shop at 3 pieces in different stages. It's like watching a ballet. Everybody from right to left is working on a piece at a different part of the process. But what's amazing to me is that the collaboration is so profound that they don't seem to even need to talk to each other. They have hand signals, and many of them have worked together for decades. So it really is, it's a sight to behold. And when I think is most, I know, and this is a dinosaur. Lino is famous for his ability to stretch a hot neck of glass out and elegantly it's so effortless that you almost don't know it's happening. Twist the neck at the very end to make the curl in the dinosaur neck. But what happened is that Pilchuck and Dale Chihuly, the boathouse, became such draws that artists live here, work here, settle here. And because of the collaborative nature of glassblowing, it's a community that's happy to help and to share by necessity. If you are a color person who's good at patterns, you help your neighbor who is strong and good at gathering big things. I've never met anybody who won't share their technique. It is a culture of sharing and collaborating, which I think is unique in terms of other art forms, and my favorite part about it. But so here's for example, a web, and this is just the names I could think of when I made my slides of having somebody like Dale Chihuly, who has a team of Martin Blank, William Morris, Flora and Joey, James Mongrain, Dante, who then hire their own, so somebody like William Morris needs a team to make his work. So he hires two people, Karen Willenbrink and Jason Johnson, who on the side fall in love and get married, but then they start making their own work. So they need a team of Raven Sky River of the Octa. So just the community builds on itself in this really beautiful way. And it's the one of the main reasons we have so much glass here in the Northwest. There are other ingredients that have made this region really unique. The first thing that not every place in the world has is a really philanthropic community supporting all these artists. Ann Gould Halberg, who's there at the top, was one of the most generous supporters of Dale's vision at Pilchuck and really helped open the curriculum up to students who couldn't afford to pay tuition and made sure the furnace and the technical equipment was everything they needed. Becky and Jack Benaroya have quite a large footprint in King and Pierce County. They were philanthropists who, Benaroya Hall, the concert venue in Seattle, is named for them. They uh, not only supported informal art education centers like Pilchuck, but artists directly. A gallery scene, our gallery scene is different here than in New York, for example, or LA, because a lot of it is based on education. The Traver Gallery is a really great resource. They always accompany their openings with free lectures and tours so that it's also a little mini museum along with being a transactional commercial gallery. We have a ton of informal and formal glass education centers. Shack Fine Arts Center in Everett, Hilltop Artists is a program in Tacoma through the school district. So you can take glassblowing classes in middle school and high school. We've talked about Pilchuck. Longhouse is a program out of Evergreen State College in Olympia that, along with glass, is focused on in helping revive and preserve indigenous practice like carving and weaving. Pratt Fine Arts Center is another great resource in Seattle. There are a lot of businesses I wanted to make sure I talked about Glassy Baby in particular, because first of all, while they're everywhere, they hire actual artists from the area to make those votives. They make them all here in the Northwest, by and large, and they just moved their production facility to here in Bremerton. So whenever you see a new Glassy Baby, they were made, right here in your back door. Another thing that I don't get to talk about very often, but I think I'm going to talk about today, are neon signs. We have one of the largest, they're called Western Neon. They're one of the largest neon fabricators and restoration companies outside of Las Vegas, which is a big deal if you think about Las Vegas is the center for neon. But they also, everybody that works at Western Neon is a electrician and glassblower in their own way. All of the tubing in neon traditionally is hand bent, is what they take a hollow tube, hold it over a flame until it's soft, and bend it into those patterns. Because of mostly because of Dale's studio. His studio, the Boathouse, has also an interesting side tangent. Does anybody know why it's called the Boathouse on Lake Union? It's on Lake Union, but it is the former production facility of George Pocock's cruise shells. If there are any Boys in the Boat fans, Dale himself is a crew fan, so he purchased the building from the Pocock family in the 80s when they were thinking about destroying it, and saved it. So he has, in the entryway, he has a really large cruise shell, but that's and because of the success of Chihuly Studio, many of the national glass color companies are here in Seattle, Olympic Color Rod being one that was at the top of mind. But just to finish up, I wouldn't be doing my job if we didn't look at some art too. So I just picked some of my favorites. A lot of, I'm sure you've seen a Chihuly chandelier kicking around. This one is in our collection at the museum, and it is small for a chandelier. It's called the Gibson chandelier because it was donated to us and commissioned by Katie and Drew Gibson. It was in their kitchen. It's quite, I think it's 15 feet tall, but it's called an end of day chandelier. So I get asked a lot how they're made, and it is a bunch of glass parts. Imagine if you took a bunch of grapes and picked off all of the fruit, all of the chandeliers have a metal structure that looks like the stem of a bunch of grapes, and the glass pieces are wired onto a bunch of little prongs. So this piece is called a carnivale, or an end of day chandelier, because it is composed of pieces from other projects. But it's so interesting. So we've um, um, recently taken this piece down, and there is an order. The studio really generously donates the team that comes to help us take this down and their time, and they do try to keep it the same as it's moved and changed. But Dale's, the story goes that Julie was in Venice, and they went into a restaurant, and it was a really old, dilapidated restaurant, and the ceiling was so low that the chandelier sat on the table. So nobody could see each other, but that was Dale's moment of inspiration was, wow, these things always hang so high in the ceiling that you never get to experience what they actually look like. So he started making them as sculptures to, acknowledge that they're often overlooked when they're hung high in the ceiling. Um, it is, and this, he is one of his groundbreaking projects was a project called Chihuly over Venice. He worked with 5 glass factories across the world: Mexico, Nutjärvi in Finland, Waterford, maybe somewhere in Czech. I'm forgetting the second two. Seattle, and the fourth maybe is in Italy. But they, without permission, assembled a series of chandeliers around Venice in 1996, like sort of at night, for the Biennale. And it was such a success PR wise that the city, I think, let him keep it. But this year is the 30th anniversary of that project. So if you see anything in the news, it's an authentic. They've done them again for this year's Biennale. This is called Clan House by Preston Singletary. Preston, oh, I see we have a Preston fan in the back. That's great. Preston Singletary is another local. He started blowing glass at a studio near Pike Place Market called Glass Eye Studio. If you've ever picked up Mount St. Helens ash paperweight, that's probably a Glass Eye paperweight. But he attended Pilchuck and worked for Dale Chihuly and Ben Moore, and Lino Tagliapietra. But what really, he had a self-reflective moment with a wood carver, a Tlingit wood carver named Zoe David, who asked Preston was still trying to find his own voice. And his other side of the family is from Southeast Alaska, so he is Tlingit. And Joe David helped him find his footing, taking the form line drawing that is so prevalent in the Coast Salish. Thank you on Zoom to whoever said Coast Salish. See, we're back. To take that form line and add it and reinterpret it to glass. So this piece is in our collection at the museum. It's called Clan House, and it's the welcome form line drawing that would welcome you in a longhouse up and down the northeast coast here. And it is 2 different, I was asked about different glassblowing techniques. So it's 2 different techniques. Um, I'm losing my word for them. The poles that are on either side are cast glass. They were cast in the Czech Republic. I was saying earlier, it's one of the biggest facilities in the world. It's where they make telescope lenses and other things. So they are they're probably 8 feet tall, and probably took 3 or 4 months to cool. So the molten glass was ladled into a giant bunt cake pan, essentially, that had the pattern of the carving on it. Sure.
How about lighthouse lenses?
So that's a great question. A side question was about where do lighthouse lenses come from? Those are usually optical glass that's cut.
Yeah.
So it starts as a block
Oh.
that somebody cuts down so that the angles are correct for that lens. So same idea. It depends. Yeah,
Okay.
no problem. No problem. So the poles on the side are cast. The panels on the inside are sandblasted. So the cameo engraving that we were talking about earlier, same idea where there's yellow glass on the bottom, black glass on the top. But he uses a technique where he takes a mask, like a big piece of tape that he puts over the glass and he cuts the tape off where he wants the pattern to be yellow in this case. So then he puts it in a sand blaster that blasts away the color and the tape saves the black basically. So it helps him maintain the sharpness of the lines. Another way to cameo engrave April Sturgeon is your neighbor. She works in Port Townsend, and she is one of the leading cameo engravers working today. She's about 42 or 43, so quite a young. She learned from a Czech master engraver named Jiří Harkuba. I included this detail on the side so you can see how that carving works. So this is a detail of the waves in this engraving. So the piece when she starts is white. And so she uses either a lathe, which is like a circular saw that spins so that you can hold the panel upward toward it, or a dental cleaning tool with a diamond tip drill. And she drills back through the glass until she gets the shade of blue or black that she's looking for. But isn't that amazing? This piece is, it's in her collection and part, I think it might be at Traver Gallery's inventory, but it's not on view currently. But what I admire about April is that she attaches herself to science research trips and documents their work and their environment in glass with the idea that it's a material that will survive in, since the Roman times. So this series is from a trip she took to Antarctica with a science group that was documenting how climate change was affecting the glacial level in Antarctica, but really beautiful, makes you take a second look at the world around you kind of work. Okay, so we were talking, these are the birds I was mentioning earlier. These are also your neighbors. Their names are Flora C. Mace and Joey Kirkpatrick. They are a collaborative duo that were some of the first women to work with Dale Chihuly on his team. And their expertise, when you work together or when they work with Dale, their expertise became adding drawings to the surface of glass. So everything that you're looking at in these bird pages is glass. There's no paint and there's no glue. And the way they do this is a technique we would call a pickup. So imagine a big steel table, you saw it in the video, where this drawing is made in glass powder that's about the same consistency as powdered sugar. So all of the colors are arranged on the Marver, the steel table, and then they take a big block of clear glass and just like using silly putty to pick up a newspaper drawing, same idea. You just put the big clear glass on top and it picks the pattern up. So these are both Flora and Joey are birders. And so they wanted to try to challenge themselves to recreate a first facts birder's guide in glass. So you're looking at a peregrine falcon is right here, is the largest one here on the left. Yeah, on the left. Doing. At this installation, if you were at the museum a year or two ago, has anybody seen this? Oh, you saw it. Oh, great. I hung most of these. Not to I crimped a lot of crimps. This installation is called The Salmon School. It's by a Skagit Valley-based artist named Joseph Gregory Rosano, who was Dale Chihuly's one of his first studio managers. And he is an avid fisherman. And he wanted to create something that was documenting how the population of steelhead salmon was changing. Oh, how it started was how do we visualize the change in steelhead salmon population in the Skagit? And as he started making these fish, so these are meant to be fish, as a fisherman sees them, little silver darts through the water, but they move, and you move around them, and the light reflects in them. They're mirrored, which is another glass technique that we could talk about. It's a clear bubble that you pour silver nitrate into, and the silver nitrate reacts with the inside of the glass. That's how mirrors are made. But as he started making them, he started collecting more data from other places in the world, Japan, Scotland, that have salmon populations. So the installation has grown as he has invited artists from these other salmon sustaining places to make fish for the installation. So it was first hung at Bellevue Art Museum before, like maybe 2018, before COVID. And then it was invited to um, be a part of the climate change summit in the UK, the UN climate change summit in the UK. And it was the first contemporary piece of art displayed at Balmoral Castle right after Queen Elizabeth passed. So it had this prestigious journey through the UK where it gained salmon, and then it came back to Tacoma where you guys probably saw it. But what's cool about it now is it's attached to a Smithsonian Natural History Museum data collection effort. So everywhere it goes, there's a science curriculum where kids help gather water samples to inform future research. So we had a lot of fun gathering Puget Sound water samples. But what I love the most about it, and I'm just making sure this is the last slide, but I wanted to end on this piece because the reflection in it is my favorite part about glass art, because it immediately invites you into it. You know, you're looking at yourself, and what Joe was hoping is that you would see yourself in the artwork and maybe think about your relationship to the world around you. Oh, it's not my last piece. It's not. It is. Where is it going? I think it's out to sea right now. It's gathering momentum. I think they're close. It's going back east to be near the data that it has been collecting in a place that is also Washington. So hopefully, I don't know when it's soon. It'll be there soon. But I love this last piece, which since you're a ferry riding city, I had to include also. This is the Kalakala for everybody that's been kicking around. It was when it was scrapped, it lived down the waterway from us in the museum, and the artist that made this piece, Rick Allen, was a big kayaker. So when he came for a residency, he paddled by it as they were finally deconstructing it. So he made us this one last Kalakala. No.
Someone was holding up the writing.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah.
What was it like?
The rattled. It's crazy. But it was really pretty on the
Oh,
water when you watch.
I bet.
Oh man. Come in on
I
the
bet.
moonlight at night. Yeah.
I bet. I was thinking about it, the fact that everybody talks about how iconic our current ferry system is visually, but the Kalakala is something else. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, then I'm extra glad I put this in here. But I love the most also that a lot of the artists are so local that their work keeps talking about us here in the Northwest. The other question I get asked a lot is, where can I see glass next? I have passes for everybody to come visit us in Tacoma. It's a little bit of a caveat of an invitation because we're currently renovating our galleries, which is exciting. Lino Tagliapietro, the maestro, who I mentioned, gave us his archive. And all of the work he made had left in the US. So we are building the Lino Tagliapietro Legacy Gallery at the museum. It'll open hopefully at the end of this year. So I have passes for you. Please come. We're open. Our hot shop is open, and we'll be, making work all summer. But if you'd like to wait and come back, that'll be great. Yes, there's a whole stack that we can pass around. Pilchuck has. You're welcome to be a student at Pilchuck, but they also do tours quarterly. And my favorite one is one that is in November, and it's an event called Light the Forest. They invite a neon artist to build a light trail through. So you get it's dark, you get a flashlight, and because it's November, it's like 3:30 in the afternoon. So it's really easy to get to, but it's if you're looking for a fun way to kick off your holiday and you're in the area. But the closest one, Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, frequently, BEMA is fantastic. And they frequently have glass exhibitions, and their big exhibition this year is honoring Pratt Fine Art Center and their 50th anniversary, and they're going to be having a lot of great programming this summer after the show opens. So I can't speak highly enough of BEMA. They're a wonderful partner. Yeah. Whew, okay, I think that's yeah. So here's our Lino gallery, a little preview of what the museum will look like when we're finished.
Thank you.
No, thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. That was an inelegant ending. Sorry about that. But you guys are a lot of fun. Hey, yes, please.
When the light goes through a stained glass window and it hits the floor, is there a name for that?
I think I would just probably call it a reflection. I'm sure it has a philosophical Latin word.
There's a French.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I know that the philosopher who wrote the most about it is Abbot Suger, if you really want to get your medieval texts back out. That's a great question. I'm gonna look that up. I'll have it for the next group. Yeah, sure.
The original church, the Christian Scientist Church, the Mother Church
Mhm.
in Boston, they have stained glass, and they have the glass is folded. They call
Ooh.
it drapery glass.
Cool.
Robes. It is really spectacular.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of great contemporary stained glass.
To distribute these, I thought we'd just start one here, passing along. I'll start one in the back, and people can take one or two. There'll be enough.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm doing this. I'm gonna take one.
Did you have a question?
I do.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
silly.
No.
Like those Chihuly things, how do you keep them?
Oh.
Free as dust?
Oh, okay. I can answer this question with an authentic answer. Spray away. The blue can that you get at Costco with the foam cleaner is the best glass cleaner because it doesn't leave any streaks. Anything ammonia based is not, we don't use ammonia based glass cleaner in the museum. So that and a no lint t-shirt, honestly. Is that a silly answer? And then to keep them safe, we also look at Mount Rainier every day, and the trains run right by Tacoma. So we talk about vibration a lot. A lot of people might use museum wax, not my favorite because it leaves all the residue on the bottom. We use a museum quality product called Roplex, which is a lot like the sticky stuff that tacks your credit card to your letter. So we can stick it on with a little dot and set it down, but it's called Roplex. It's not commercially. It is liquid, kind of like rubber cement. But the other thing I would do if you had something glass that you were worried about walking around is if you get, we call it Mylar. When you make a gift basket, what's the clear cellophane? If you cut a cellophane shape that's the same shape as the bottom, it'll create enough friction to kind of keep it stable on your shelf. That's the way I do it.
Even through earthquakes.
Well, if we have an earthquake big enough to wreck your China cabinet, we have a lot. You'll be worried about a lot more than your China cabinet. And that's how we feel at the museum.
And we'll have another treat also for you. Katie will demonstrate these.
Oh, I'll
that are
try.
over on the bottom for you.
Yeah, sure. Are there any Zoom questions?
No, they were not.
Oh, you guys, thanks for hanging in me on Zoom. Oh, thanks. Sure.
I've been to really old buildings that have glass
Mhm.
still, and the glass is like slumps.
Yes,
Why? Why does it do that?
that's a hot topic of debate. So in a lot of science textbooks, they will say that because glass is an amorphous solid, if it exists vertically long enough, it eventually begins to slump. It is more likely that the recipe that glass was made from is not stable, but it's also more likely that the way they made those panes before there was equipment was that they would make a cylinder, like a round cylinder, and cut it and let it heat and slump open. So it's more likely a manufacturing flaw from having to make them by hand.
Now, I just thought maybe let me get on it.
That could also be part of usually, if I have heard more museum glass people say that it's a maker problem, not a gravity problem. But the science textbooks still say it's a gravity problem.
Question, a little bit away from art glass into architectural glass.
I'll do my best.
Where are there factories in America who do the big panels that would be installed?
Yeah.
Skyscrapers.
Yeah, there are a lot. The closest one to here is a company called Bullseye Glass in Portland. and they make a lot of industrial glass for fabrication. There's also a company that recently went out of business called Spectrum Glass in Woodinville. So I'm not sure where they're relocating, but they're also a big local supplier.
Well, that happened, California.
Did they move to California?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
moved all their stuff down in
Oh,
California.
bummer.
Yeah.
I'm from Woodinville, so that was a bummer for me. What are you gonna do?
I thought they were in Mexico.
Oh, did they? Spectrum?
Well, the,
Wow.
Yeah.
but sorry, I understand that they sold their recipe to, Oceanside in Mexico. And they make the nuggets. For
Oh, cool.
Oceanside is Oceanside, California.
Cool.
But the factory's in Mexico.
Glassy Babies. You'll see them at Glassy Baby. They're a candle votive. And their claim to fame is that they donate a portion of the proceeds from their candle votives to different causes, depending on which one you get. Yes, I imagine that was when they got famous, but you'll see them at the airport. They're kind of a local staple now. Yeah.
You don't.
No, I don't know where. It's still in process. Yeah.
And I wanted to remind you to evaluate, and if you can't do it this way, you can go to Humanities Washington and also evaluate it that way.
Yeah.
And these are for you to pick up.
Yeah, please. And it's,
Take it on, instead of taking the picture from there, you can take this home and do it. Ask your grandchild how to do it.
it's odd for me to be outside of our hot shop and not get to talk about glass blowing while it's happening. So I can't help myself. So this is blowpipe. So all of the glass blowing that we do starts with this straw device. It is made of metal. It has a hole on both ends, and it works the same way. Sorry if you heard me say this earlier. It works the same way as a honey gatherer. So you stick it in a pot of molten glass and work with it, and kind of like dipping a candle in wax. The more dips you take, the more volume of glass that you get. But I have two statistics for you. This, when you see this, you'll see the burn marks. So this is how, you're probably about here when the heat of the piece is close enough to burn your skin. So think about that. But the other interesting fact I have for you, physics-wise, when your glass blowers use this, they're on a bench, and the piece sits on a rail, acts like a fulcrum. The weight of the piece doubles every 12 inches away that your hand gets, which is important because bigger pieces are hot. So if you're making that octopus that we saw a picture of is probably 18 pounds, but it's big. So you're holding out here, so it's more like 70 when they're sculpting it, and it's as hot as molten lava. So I'll start this down here since we
What kind of metal does it melt? What kind of metal?
It's steel, so it just has a really high melting coefficient. But the thing that's amazing is that a lot of the tools that glass blowers use are wood. These, we call these blocks. Glass blowers use them to help make something round. So they take the glass that's on the blowpipe and roll the pipe through this mold to take the circular shape. But the way that these work is they sit in a bucket of water for the day. So the water absorbs into the wood, and instead of burning the wood, the steam that's put off by the water evaporating cushions the tool from getting burned by the heat of the glass. But they use these. This is a pretty foundational glass blowing tool, because before you can sculpt anything, you have to build the bubble that you're working with to be symmetrical, so that it heats and cools evenly. So here, I'll what these are. They do burn eventually, so they get decommissioned. You can see this one finally wore out, so the hot shop let me take it. Let's see. I don't do this when we have school tours, but you guys look trustworthy, so I'm going to do this. These two tools are 500 years, have not changed in 500 years. These are two staples of Italian glass blowing. This pair of tongs is called a pair of jacks. And these work in two ways. They can be tweezers, so you can pull hot glass. Most of these tools exist so you don't get burned trying to shape something that acts as your hand. So these can be tweezers, but the other thing they do is help make things circular while they're spinning. So once you have a goblet, for example, and you want that goblet to be round, you can put these on the inside of the bubble and let the bubble spin around them like backwards calipers, basically. But these have not changed in the 500 years that Lena worked. And these are called diamond shears because of the shape. They're sharp. Don't stick your finger in there. That's why I can't give them to kids. But they're called diamond shears, and they're this shape to help cut the glass all the way around when they're trimming it while it's molten. So here, I'll start this one this way. I'll get that one. But the shape of these tools hasn't changed in quite a while. And the other thing that's remarkable about the Northwest, thanks to this community, is a lot of tools are custom made, and a lot of those tool makers work here on the peninsula, actually. These, let's see, here's a tour. If you guys, this is a torch head. A lot of the heating and reheating, you'll see when you watch glass blowing, the pipe goes in and out of what we call a reheating furnace, pictured right there on my title slide. But when artists are working, it's easier for the glass to be soft, so they'll use a torch to heat up the specific place they're working on.
You can start to understand why it takes so many people.
So many people and so long. So it takes, if you're making a fancy wine glass, maybe an hour or 2 hours. I've frequently seen pieces like the octopus take multiple days because they'll build the parts and then assemble them at the very end. But these, everybody loves putting on these, so I'll pass these around. These are the mittens. So the part we don't talk about ever, because the beginning is so cool, is what happens at the end. So when a piece is finished, to get it off the pipe, they use those jacks to dip the jacks in the bucket of water that those blocks sit in, and they drip water on the neck of the piece on the blowpipe, and the change in temperature causes the piece to crack. And then they have this elegant moment where they use the end of the jacks and they tap the pipe, and the crack knocks the piece off. But they catch that piece, sometimes in a full suit, usually in a full suit. But these are Kevlar mittens. They're made of firefighter suit equipment. So if it's a big piece, they wear the Chernobyl, kit and caboodle. But for something like a wine glass, they're just catching it with this. And we have a series of ovens that we call annealing ovens, and they work with a computer to cool at different rates. So at the beginning of the day, they program it to cool based on what they know they're making. So something like a wine glass needs 8 hours to cool, and something like that octopus is probably overnight or a day or two.
So you just pulled it out and let it go, it would just crack.
Yeah, usually it would just crack. Sometimes with glass like borosilicate, the Pyrex glass works differently because it doesn't cool the same way. But yes, it usually would crack.
I have a question.
Sure.
How that one that you did the weight, remember that was carved in?
Yeah.
Went on fire?
Yeah.
But they carve it in, but still it's smooth. So how does it get back to be smooth again? If you're carving with a diamond.
Very carefully. A lot of very detailed. That is all hand smooth. Oh, I see what you're asking. No, the width of the pad that they're using to engrave can change. And to do the smoothing, they use more like a leather belt than a grit. So they, like sandpaper, you can adjust the amount of texture that you're using to engrave.
I never knew that you could smooth glass.
Yeah. If you move a belt fast enough, you can. But it's usually a leather belt with diamond grit and water pasted onto it. Yeah, and these, because we were talking about Italian patterns, these are all examples of how pattern looks before glass blowers chop it up and make it into Marini. So this corkscrew one is called Zamfirico cane. It's an Italian technique where they take straight tubes and twist them against each other. But I'll let you guys, these are just a little example. And then for the other side that's always so patient, another way they add color to clear glass is by using, you're filming me. I'm sorry, Jill. I'm involved. I'm a hands-on lecturer. So this is called frit. It works like granulated sugar. So they will put it on the marble. This particular frit would add a polka dot pattern to the glass, or a ombre pattern, depending on how you apply it. But this frit is some of the Chihuly frit they use to make those spotted. Yeah, it's cool. And the heat of the bubble helps it melt some of the time. Some of the time they keep it, we have a piece of equipment we call the garage, which is because it is always, it's a box that the inside is always 900 degrees. So you can make something and park it and keep it warm, like a proving oven kind of. But I'll let you guys pass around this. You can now say you've touched a Chihuly frit.
There's a local glass studio where a person can go and for a modest fee play with glass.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
Yeah, Lisa Starrett.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
Oh,
that's great. And I highlight all of those studios are usually artist run, so definitely.
It's usually, you make a mosaic or something and then they put it in the oven.
Cool. That's great. I was trying to find if there was anywhere in Bremerton that you could actually try glass blowing, but it looked like Tacoma was the closest to here. But we do have glass blowing at the museum, and there's a couple of great studios. Oh, and this last one, since I'm here, this is what the color looks like when you buy it from a color company. It's a little piece of what is called a color bar. So you can either chop this up into smaller pieces or melt it and put it on the top. And this is the last piece of, this is probably the most important to a glassblower piece of equipment. This is a paddle that they use to shield the gaffer who's working with the glass from the immediate heat of the piece. So it's a large cutting board. Oh, and it's covered in ash, of course it is. When it starts and as it slowly gets burned down, but it helps shield whoever's working from the immediate heat of the reflection. But that's just, I'm not going to pass this around because why would you want it? Sure.
How do they get the powdered glass to put down and then, spread the piece of glass on it like the birds?
Ooh, they arrange it basically with a stylus, like a sand painting. And the lines are longer sticks of glass that they've melted with a torch and put on top of it and then picked up.
Do they have to work in reverse?
Yes, that's a great question. The question was, do they have to work in reverse when they draw? Yes. And often they have to work with the front color on the bottom of the pile. Yeah, very complicated.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, you guys. Appreciate it. Yeah.